All right, hey teaching team, this is Jason giving you guys week 2 of our Passion series. Sorry, this is a little bit late. Of course, I intended to do this on Thursday, but kids got sick and man, everything was thrown out the window. So I decided to be able to do this for you now. It's a little different because, again, Jake Lurkey is going to be presenting this officially. I know he's going to be showing the entirety of his message to the teaching team, but I do want you guys to see where I'm going so you can offer suggestions so we can really have real discussion about where this outline is going and what maybe are some things that we can give to him to make it even better. So I'm going to kind of teach through it, but it's not going to be quite as formal as if I was presenting this to you as a sermon of my own, because I know he's going to make it his and I want him to do that, but I do want him to get a sense of what it would be like kind of if I did it. So the whole theme of this one is, remember again, the king coming. So we had him entering into his court, and that was the triumphal entry. We talked about that last week. This is him coming into his palace. And so hope you guys enjoy it. And it's going to be amazing. I'm excited about it. It's a good word. We'll get started here. All right. Good morning, Ignite Church. Pastor Jason here. So glad that you guys are with us today for week 2 of our series called The Passion. Now, if you weren't here with us last week, really quickly, what we talked about last week was Jesus coming into Jerusalem the last week of his life. And so this entire series, we're talking about the Passion Week. And last week, we talked about the triumphal entry. We saw Jesus come into Jerusalem, declaring himself to be the King of Israel, fulfilling prophecy that was written about how the true king, the King of Kings, would come into the city. And so he fulfilled those prophecies. He illustrated the kind of king that he was going to be, a king that was a saving king, a serving king. And it was absolutely incredible. If you missed it, I would love for you to go back, check it out, because for you to understand Jesus as King, as Lord, as leader of your life, it is so instrumental to really know him and to really follow him. This week, we're continuing this journey of Jesus into his last week in the Passion. We're going to be back again in Matthew, and we're really going to be talking about what it's like when Jesus comes into his house, the temple of God, the place that God created to be his perpetual place of presence, his perpetual place of love. And so to start us off, if you haven't pulled out your app already, go ahead and pull it out. I'm going to be looking a little bit ahead in our story in Matthew 23. I think that the scripture I'm about to read, it really illustrates the entirety of how Christ felt during the Passion Week. Again, he's here at the culmination of his mission. He has spent the last 3 years loving and leading his disciples, working miracles, trying to show everyone who's willing to have eyes to see that he is the foretold Messiah. And as he comes into his final time here on earth, he looks over Jerusalem, and in Matthew 23 he says this. He says, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I say to you, you shall see me no more until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." And so Jesus standing, on the cliffs kind of surrounding Jerusalem, able to look over the city, he calls out, and I can't help but imagine, my brothers and sisters, put yourself in that place. Jesus, he loves this city. He loves what this city stands for. He loves that God created a place for the entire world to come and know him and worship him and be cleansed for him. And so all that Jerusalem was intended to be is so beautiful and so good. And yet Jesus looks past, what it was supposed to be and into the reality of what it was. And I think it broke his heart. And so I can't help imagine him saying this any other way other than with great mourning, oh, I see who you could be and who you should be, Jerusalem, the holy city. But this is who you are. You are the city that anytime God sends a prophet into your midst, anytime the word of truth comes among you, you kill the prophet. Instead of heeding what God is trying to say, instead of repenting, instead of trying to be what God made you to be, instead you go your own way. And then he says, how I wanted to gather you together like a hen puts her chicks underneath her. And again, I'm a Bear Grass boy, and so a little farming illustration here. It kind of strikes near and dear to my heart. But this is a real thing. Mother hens literally will take chicks and place them underneath their own bodies. And to get to a chick, you're gonna have to kill the mom. And so the protectiveness of that, the love of that, the care of that, really beautiful. And he's saying, that's how I want to treat you. I want to gather you underneath myself. And by the way, for those of us who are children of God, saved by the blood of Jesus, that's what he does do. We are underneath that covering. But he looks over Jerusalem and says, but you're not willing. And then he speaks with a sense of prophecy and say, but the time's going to come soon. You're not going to see me anymore. Like, this time that you have me here with you, like you're neglecting it. And there's going to be a time when you don't see me anymore. Again, when you kind of sum up how Christ probably felt during the Passion Week, I think those words are so telling. Jesus fulfilling the mission that God gave to him with a great pride and with great integrity, but at the same time being so brokenhearted that the very people that he came to save and the very people that he loves more than any other, they don't see who he is. They don't recognize who he is. And that goes from the leaders of the Sanhedrin, that goes from the royals in Jerusalem, all the way down to his very own disciples, even at this point, didn't really understand who he was and what he was about. So after he triumphantly enters Jerusalem, he goes into his house. And again, I can't help but imagine that Jesus probably did that with both a sense of expectation and also probably some reservation, because he knew of the corruption that was in his house. He knew of the problems that had permeated the temple. As a matter of fact, one of the very first things that Jesus does, when you look in the Gospel of John and you see that Jesus goes to Jerusalem officially, once he kind of started his ministry, the first time he goes to Jerusalem, one of the first things he does, he cleanses out the temple. He goes his first time around, and people in the temple were not doing what they were supposed to do. And Jesus has this moment where religious zeal overtook him, and he overturns tables and he cleanses out the temples. And the disciples, they remember that, like, hey, this is a foretelling of the Messiah, that like zeal for your house has overtaken me. He's coming back again at the end of his ministry. And I wish I could tell you that he finds something different, but the scriptures are pretty clear that unfortunately he doesn't. So let's read that. Matthew 21, 12 through 13. When the king comes into his house, guys, let it be known this. Jesus cares about this. He immediately gets it clean. God cares about having a clean house. And I think that's really important for the story then and also for us to understand now. So let me read this for you. Matthew 21, 12. It says, then Jesus went into the temple of God. He drove out all those who bought and sold in the temple. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he said to them, it's written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you've made it a den of thieves. Again, for Jesus to come back in his last week to the city that he loves and to this house that he loves, this house that when he was 12 years old, his mom and dad had to return after leaving him in Jerusalem unknowingly. And they found him, there, teaching and learning and growing and astounding everyone with how wise he was. Jesus had a very special relationship with the temple, even from his time as a child. And he comes back into this place, and I'm sure, longing and hoping to see it be what it's supposed to be, a place of worship, a place of prayer, a place of healing, a place of mercy, a place of forgiveness. And what he comes in and sees, it's a place of business. Don't want to dive too much into it for the teaching team, but Jake, you might want to dive into it more. But basically, the priesthood, they had found a good financial racket through the temple. People who were part of the nation of Israel were required to come and offer sacrifice very regularly for their sins and for their blessings. So very regular generosity was an inborn natural part of being a part of the nation of Israel. Like everybody did it. And it was considered to be very dishonorable, of course, if you didn't do it. It was expected for you to go and offer sacrifice. And there were accommodations made for every range, from the poor all the way to the very, very wealthy. But here's what the people in the temple did. They found out, hey, what we can do to make a little extra cheddar on the side is when people bring something to sacrifice, because people are supposed to bring of their own flock an animal to sacrifice. We can let them know, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, your animal isn't really suitable for sacrifice. There were very specific regulations that had to be fulfilled for an animal to be appropriate for sacrifice. And the priesthood was skilled enough that they could convince most of the laity, most normal people, that, hey, man, sorry, this is a lovely bull or a lovely, ram or a lovely doves, but they're not quite suitable for sacrifice. But here's what we'll do. We will sell you an animal that is suitable for sacrifice. And so we'll take your animal, and just for a little bit more, we will give you a temple-approved animal for sacrifice. And so they would take the animal from the person would pay a little bit, and then they would give them an animal. But here's what they would do. Then they would take the animal that you just gave to them, and the next person that came in, they would give them your animal, and remember, they get a little extra. And so they were robbing them. It was a racket. It was total robbery. And so when Jesus sees his house, which is supposed to be a place of prayer, instead kind of being run as a den of thieves, like this financial racket is going on here, this money being, exchanged and given, he kind of loses it, because the king the king cares about his house being clean. And so let me read Matthew 21. It says, he went into the temple. He drove out all those who bought and sold in the temple. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. He said to them, it's written, my house should be called a house of prayer, but you've made it a den of thieves. Again, like he's passionate about that. I don't know how many of you are passionate about having your house clean. I want to admit freely that I'm a little funny about cleanliness. Certain things don't even touch me, and I don't even see them. But other things like really, really drive me crazy. And so yeah, just kind of find out how many of you does it really drive you crazy for there to be like a lot of dishes in the sink? Anybody? Okay, dishes in the sink. Okay, some of you. Okay, very good. How many of you, your thing is, man, the laundry piling up? Like it just drives you crazy when people's laundry hampers are full. Okay, my wife's one of those. Yeah, can't stand to have overflowing laundry. How many of you, is it more of a bathroom thing, like, grime and grunge, bathroom's not, looking right, maybe not smelling right? Okay, some of you, are there any dust people? Anybody that's like, if I go into your house and I just am able to run my finger across something and there's like dust on it, it just drives me a little crazy? Okay, amen. Yeah, my thing, like, dishes don't touch me, the dust. I don't love it, but I probably won't notice it at your house if you ever invite me over. But I'm weird with bathrooms, and so like, yeah, I want a toilet to be clean. I want a shower if I'm going to be in it to be clean. That's one of the things that it does kind of give me a little bit of a shiver if something with the restroom isn't quite right. And so I can let dishes pile, I can let laundry pile, but man, when I'm going to go into that place, I want it to be clean. Jesus, he wants the temple to be clean. And here's the thing that's really important for us as New Testament believers. The temple is you, and the temple is me. And Jesus, that king, he immediately cares about his house being clean. And for you and for I, the truth is, we don't have people selling doves and exchanging money in the temples of our hearts. But if we cannot say with full integrity that there's not competitors for the seat, for the throne of our heart, now some of you, maybe you can say that, and I say praise for that. But I know for most humans, there's other things. There are other things, and some of them are financial, some of them are relational, some of them are spiritual, some of them are emotional. These things, they have come into our heart, into our life, and these things are competition for God. These things, sometimes it's sin and shame, but other times it could be a good thing, but not the best thing. Jesus is determined that the best thing, that he be the sole focus of the temple of our life. And so one of the things I want you to ask yourself is like, is there anything in my temple that I know needs to be cleaned out so that Christ more fully, more comfortably, so that the King of Kings can suitably come into his house and run the house the way that it should be run? Being a believer is understanding that we're in a process of sanctification and cleanliness, and we need to take it seriously because the King cares about having a clean house. And so, Jay, you can use any story about cleanliness. You can use anything like that. Like, again, there's a million places you can go. If I was preaching this myself, I might talk about my kids being sick right now, because they are. And guess how important it is when you have sick people in your house. All of a sudden, things being clean, things being sanitized, you're spraying Clorox spray everywhere. Like, all of a sudden, cleanliness becomes really important because you realize you've understood something dirty has gotten in your house, something unclean's there, and you're really focused on cleaning it. It's so important for us to have a clean house. But you can go a lot of different places with that. Talk about dog, all kinds of things. But the King wants the house clean, and the house, the temple, is now us. Number 2, guys, when the King comes into his house, and this is exciting, he eagerly invites his family into his house. See, what's so incredible about this king is that his house, his palace, is not exclusive only to him. Typically, if you were to try to go to the to the White House here in America, you can take a tour, but you can't go live in the house. You can't. There are certain places that you're not allowed. If you're going to go to Buckingham Palace, they might give you a tour at a cost, but there's a lot of places that belong to the royal family alone. It is not a shared place. It is a private place. But the king's house, the king's palace, it is a place, instead of him keeping people out, he invites everyone in. And so when Jesus comes into his house, instead of excluding those for coming in, he invites them that come in. And the people that he invites, I think, are very, very interesting. So let's look together. Matthew 21:14-17. It says, "Then the blind and the lame came to Jesus in the temple, and he healed them." Whew, I love that. So Jesus didn't just invite the powerful, the wealthy, the beautiful, the strong, the wise. Like, he invited the people that everyone else rejected. And as a matter of fact, just to get even really technical, sorry, I hadn't read the whole thing, but like understand like that according to Jewish tradition, people who had these types of illnesses, these types of genetic illnesses, their bodies weren't perfect, eyes weren't perfect, legs weren't, they weren't allowed to go in the temple. Like, so there's this is a little bit taboo that people are coming in the temple to see God who can heal them. Again, for us New Testament believers, that sounds crazy. Of course, people who are hurting should come to the healer. But for that time and for that tradition, this was not something that people were excited about, because like God was perfect, and to be in his presence, you needed to be a representative of that perfection. But Jesus is breaking tradition. He's showing everybody's welcome in my house. Now that the king has come, everybody's welcome in the house. It says, but when the chief priests and scribes saw the wonderful things that he did, and when they saw children crying out in the temple saying, Hosanna to the Son of David. And remember last week we talked about Hosanna. Hosanna is another way of saying save us. It's a call for salvation. They were indignant. That's a biblical word for angry. They were mad. And they said to him, do you hear what these are saying? And Jesus said to them, yes. Have you never read, out of the mouths of babes and nursing infants, they have perfected praise. He left them. He went out to the city of Bethany, and he lodged there. Again, you see Jesus, fulfilling his mission and the joy that comes with it. And then you see Jesus dealing with the priesthood, and you see that frustration again. You're the same crew that killed all the prophets. Jesus is going in. He's inviting everyone come into the house of God. And some of these people are like, but we're not allowed in the house of God. He's like, I own the house. It's my house, and I'm telling you, come into my house, and I will heal you. I'll restore you. Could you imagine being someone born blind or born lame, someone who was dealing with such an illness? And not only was there a natural sense of pity and ostracism just from everyone around you, because of course you're very limited in how you can contribute to society, but there's also the spiritual bias against you. Like, you must have done something wrong to be blind. You must have done something spiritually wrong to be lame. And so you can't go in the temple. You can't worship with us. There's this wall of separation between you and God. And now to have the king come into his house and say, no, the wall is gone. Come and be with me. And not only do I want you to come and worship, which is a huge, huge deal, but you come and I'll heal you. You will come in and you'll be restored. You will be different when you leave than when you first entered in. Man, what a beautiful picture of what the church is supposed to be. So there's a lot of places, Jake, that you can go with that. If there ever was a time that you felt excluded, or if there was ever a time, if you want to be, transparent, that you excluded someone, like, again, you can talk about that, like, but understanding that, again, we are the temple, and so we are supposed to be people that welcome others into our life, into our home, into our story, into our hurt, like, and again, that's hard to do. It's easier to keep people at a distance, but as the modern day equivalent of the house of God, we should be an example of a place where everyone and anyone is welcomed to come in. And the point of application that I would encourage you to make in this is, again, challenging people like, how accessible is your life? How often are you inviting people into your story? Ask them the question like, hey, can you write down the name of someone who you really would say is a friend? Ask them, who are they praying for? Who have they, again, got a spiritual sense of responsibility for? Because as the representative of the house of God, we should be ones that are representing that anyone and everyone is welcomed into our story and into the healing and grace and love and forgiveness and prayer and mercy that our story represents. So Jesus, he eagerly invited people into his house in the physical. We should be representatives of that. As a modern day temple of God, people should know they are welcomed to be with us, to come into our story. Is the application point. So we see this about the king. He cares about a clean house, and he cares about a full house. A house where people are welcome to come in and to fill the house. Number 3, when the king comes to his house, he authoritatively asserts his position. There is only one person that's in charge of this house. There's only one person that makes the household rules. There's only one person that sets the standard, and that is Jesus. And I definitely would tell a story if I was doing this about the twins. I mean, even this week, to be completely honest, Zachary got really, really upset at me because me and Jessica were talking, He hasn't felt good this week. It's easier to be rude when you feel bad than not, and I want to give him grace for that. But my wife and I, we were talking, and he wanted to show me something. He was on Tylenol at the moment and felt pretty good. He was playing something on Minecraft. He's obsessed with that right now, and he really wanted to show me something. And so he comes into our conversation like, Daddy, and my wife and I turn and say, hey, just wait a second, buddy. Like, let us finish our conversation, and you'll have my full attention. And man, he kind of went ballistic. He's kind of freaked out. He kind of lost control. He got very, very upset because he felt like he had the right to set the rules and the standard of, the who's talking to who when and who's more important and who's a priority. And so I had to have a moment with him where it's like, listen, you don't have any right to be angry here. This is our house, me and your mom's. And we set the rules. And the rule is that when adults are talking, we're going to be respectful. We're going to wait. We're going to be patient. And then they're going to give us attention. And it's, again, when it's your house, you can set your rules, but you're in my house. You have to follow our rules because he didn't feel like that was fair. But it doesn't matter how we felt because it's not his house. So anything like that where you're talking about house rules, a lot of stories you can pull from your past and from your present about that. But going into the story of Scripture, Matthew 21:23 says, now Jesus came into the temple. The chief priest and the elders of the people confronted him as he was teaching. And so they interrupt his teaching, very similar to the story that I gave. So anything about interruption is good, but you don't have to. But they interrupted his teaching, and they said, by what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority? And so they're trying to assert dominance. This is Jesus, you're the guest, and you're coming into our house, and you're taking this position of teaching, and we're not so sure we're comfortable about it. So tell us who gives you the authority. And of course, this was a trap, because if Jesus said God gave him the authority, they were going to attack him. If Jesus said that he gave himself the authority, they were going to attack him. There's no right answer here. But at the end of the day, they were trying to illustrate that this is our place, and you're a guest in it, and you're not acting like a guest, you're acting like it's your house. And so I love how Jesus sets them straight. It says, but Jesus answered and said to them, okay, well, let me ask you one thing, which if you tell me, I likewise will tell you the authority by which I do these things. So Jesus is saying, okay, that's look at, instead of getting angry, which, he had the right to do, he says, you answer my question, I'll answer your question. He said, the baptism of John, where was it from? Was it from heaven? Or was it from men? Because again, John was a very controversial figure. A lot of the leaders of the Pharisees and the Sadducees did not love him. And so Jesus was like, I just want to get your opinion. Do you think that John the Baptist was sent from God? Or do you think he's some crazy fool who's just out in the wilderness wearing animal hide and eating bugs? And he had no business doing what he was doing. What is your opinion on that? It says, and they reasoned among themselves, and they said, well, if we say from heaven, then Jesus will say to us, well, why didn't you believe him? Because John was so clear. Jesus, this man is the Son of God. He over and over and over and over again asserted it. Everybody knew that. Like, John the Baptist was a believer in Jesus as the Messiah. It says, but if we say from men, we fear the multitude, for they all count John like a prophet. So again, John had a large following. He'd been martyred by this point, and a lot of people believe like, hey, John, this man, he loved God, he loved us. He's a representative of what it means to be a prophet. And so they knew, hey, we can either affirm what John said, and Jesus is going to be like, well, then why are you challenging me? Or we can deny it, and if it gets out that we denied it, people are going to rebel against us because they really believe in the goodness of John. So it says, so they answered Jesus, and they said, well, we don't know. And then he said to them, neither will I tell you by which authority I do these things. In other words, at the end of the day, Jesus, and he was, again, so beautiful. You could talk about that, how Jesus often answered questions with questions. But at the end of the day, Jesus is saying to them, hey, I don't owe you an explanation for my authority. This is my house. I'm the king. You should be the one answering the questions, not me. And for the application point, so like, so what does that have to do with us? Again, most of the time, we represent, unfortunately, the chief priests and the elders a little more in the story than we would like. We want God to explain everything to us. We want him to explain why he does what he does and, what's he up to. But at the end of the day, he is king. He is leader. He is Lord. And he doesn't owe us an explanation. Instead, we hold ourselves accountable to him. And so you can challenge people with that reality. Like, hey, what type of things do you wish God would tell you? And then to kind of leave the challenge of like, when's the last time that you really fell on your face and said, God, show me any part of my life that isn't pleasing in your sight. Because if there's anything that's not pleasing in your sight, I'm going to change it. And for that to be the final point, for you to be to kind of finish up saying, hey, we're going to open up the altar today, and we just want you to come. Whatever it is that you know isn't right between you and God, like, now is the time to come and bring it to him and make it right. And he promises that he will. And so it's a really great point to finish on. Like, he is the king. He is the leader. He is the Lord. It is his will. It is his way. It is his journey. It is his book. It is his planet. All kind of emphasizing that and saying, like, we can come and we can line up with him, or we can stand in pride and demand that he line up with us and leave very, very disappointed. So I hope that helps out. A lot of really great application. An application for cleanliness, an application for living a life that invites people in, and an application for understanding the true authority, that God is in charge and we're not, and we need to make sure that everything's in alignment with our life. So I hope that helps. I know that this wasn't a perfect sermon, but again, you can see where it's trying to go. For those of you on the teaching team other than Jake, for you to think of illustrations that could be really powerful and good, for you to have questions or concerns about, this journey is totally appropriate. But yeah, week 1, triumphal entry. Week 2, him going to his house. Week 3 is going to be his coronation, his suffering. Week 4 is going to be the resurrection. And then week 5, again, it's going to be the commission of the king as he sends us out. So it's going to be a powerful series, y'all. Really excited about it. Anyway, I'm going to post this up. Thank you guys for everything you do. Love you. Bye.